Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming. The conversation today will be in English, hopefully, mostly English. And my name is Rana Werbin, and I'm very happy to present Orly Castel Bloom and Nell Zink, our guests. Nell's first book was just translated into Hebrew and just came out by Shira Hefer, who's sitting here, Locus. It's called Hakotli in Hebrew, The Wall Creeper. And her second book, Mislaid, came out about a year ago. Yes. And the third book, Nicotine, is in writing in October. Okay.
Along with the fourth book.
Along with the fourth book.
They're coming out at the third and fourth books are coming out on the same day.
Wow.
Just to avoid confusion.
Yeah, so just started 2 years ago and has to...
You know, I don't have much time left.
Right. And Orly, I think, published 11 books already, started a while ago. A short while ago, at the age of 27, about 5-6 years ago. It was?
30 years ago. 28 to be precise.
And just won the Sapir Prize this year for her last novel, the Egyptian novel. And I think because most of us probably know Orly's writing much better than most of you probably know Nell's writing, we were thinking of starting with a short reading from the book, from The Wall Creeper, and maybe just a page or two.
Less than that. I just thought, because there are some people I know here in the audience, and I don't know if they've all read the book, but people often assume because it's in the first person that it might be autobiographical.
I assumed that, I admit.
So I'm going to read. There is one short passage that is, in fact, autobiographical. So that's what I'm going to read. I woke at 6, alone, and went downstairs on my bicycle, intending to ride out to the river. It was pitch dark and foggy. I don't know why that surprised me. The year had gotten away from me. Stubbornly, it stayed dark. Whenever the bike stopped moving, the dynamo stopped turning and the light vanished, leaving me blinded from its former glare on the fog. I stood at the spot where a dike had been relocated and saw that everything around me was black. Everything. But I could hear birds, geese, grumbling and complaining like couples fighting over blankets, lapwings elbowing each other, a curlew begging God for blessed sleep. Something big passed over my head in near silence, just a whoosh of feathers. There were no songbirds, just the crypto-human voices of avian insomniacs, and I started to cry uncontrollably. That's the only autobiographical scene.
Such a shame. I was really hoping the entire thing would... No, but really I think that's a good point to start with, because I think both of you were suspected, and I suppose most writers, right, and authors, and maybe women authors in more than men authors, or maybe not, are suspected in writing about their real lives, and I think because most of your novels at first were in the first person, everybody probably thought that Dolly City is you. So maybe...
They used to call me Dolly. And it was terrible. Because I'm not Dolly. People usually confuse between the man who writes the book and the man who is alive writing the book, not the novel. I drank too much whiskey, I think.
It's okay.
Sorry.
We'll excuse the...
It is correct to say that some of my writing is autobiographic, and especially my last book, in which I wanted to get rid of all that is autobiographic that wasn't written before, and to start all over again. And now I'm in a point that I have to start all over again, and I don't know what to do.
Maybe go to another place. Yeah, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But I wanted to ask you then, starting at a later age, you know, I mean, I don't know if you've started writing before you've published, or many years before you've published, or just started writing for publication.
I've been writing for a long time, but the first time I finished a novel was in 1998. I was well over 30. I was 34. So I started short and got longer.
So what happened between 1998 and 2014?
Well, the only writers I knew were very obscure writers, and they told me that there was absolutely no benefit to being published, that your friends who you could just give the manuscript to by hand, they might read the book, but they would then have to pay for it. So you would end up giving it to them for free. So basically, I decided to skip the middleman and just write and give the novels to my friends. And it took some persuading to convince me that it was worth even trying to go to a publishing house.
And then you didn't think of going back to your old novels and starting from there? I mean, you were willing to just skip and start publishing from the...
Well, I had a bad habit of deleting novels that I didn't want to give to friends. If I didn't write it for some specific person, then it was written just for me, and I would usually find it not very good, so then it would disappear. Probably not a bad thing. I don't have any, youthful mistakes I need to suppress. They're already suppressed.
Orly, did you ever feel like some of your novels, you would have thought of
Not
whether
publishing.
to publish them? Or yeah?
I have novels I didn't publish, about 4. It is in the institution of books that buries, yes, where you bury your book. It is buried.
So you gave Nazim your 4 unpublished novels? Uh-huh.
Yes. No. I had also another novel that I wrote in 1990 or 1989, but it was erased by itself from the computer. 250 pages.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
So this explains the energy in Dolly City, the rage. After
that, Dolly City came just after that?
a minute after it was, because I couldn't bear myself alive without something being written.
But you didn't rewrite the novel that was
No,
erased? You
no,
just started
it was
again?
dead. I had the second half of it, so I thought I can rewrite the first half, but it was absolutely dead words.
Wow.
So my ex-husband,
tragedy.
who was my husband, took all the floppy disks to a technician, and he couldn't revive the text. And I was very angry. I remember I was trembling in the kitchen. Not a good situation for a woman. I was trembling in the kitchen, and I felt I have no identity. And I felt that it was when I was 30. And I felt I need to start something immediately. And I wrote the 3 first pages of Dolly City.
Wow.
And I told myself, you have just finished a short story. You exist.
You exist. So does that ever happen to you? I mean, now that you're in a flow of writing, do you ever erase? Or erase chunks, I mean, large amounts of...
Yeah, I tend to be very cavalier about erasing things. I'm used to it. I've been doing it all my life. So if I decide some scene, isn't quite what I want, I just delete it because I have a certain faith that I can write another one. I'm not afraid of running out of material, not yet. Not quite.
One of the most obvious things, to me at least, when I read your books, I read the two that I had, was that it seemed to me that you are language, that you're so fluent, that the language is in your body and you can just do anything you want with it, and which of course made me very envious, and also because maybe maybe you can identify with me. I mean, we maybe might feel like that, swimming like that in Hebrew, but English has 1,000 years, I guess, or 750 years of English being a spoken, written language.
Sometimes I think, though it almost sounds politically incorrect to say that in a world of immigrants, that maybe I benefit from my parents having come. My family came mostly from England. I come from a family that was mostly speaking English since English began. So my mother had an enormous range of different idioms and figures of speech that she would use, very idiomatic English, not this global English, not writing for translation, but a very American/British way of speaking that was very oblique and almost impossible to understand if you weren't a member of the family. And
what did they do, your parents? I'm curious.
Well, she was a librarian by trade. And my dad just read books obsessively day and night. I've never seen a house with as many books as we had.
And you grew up in California, right?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I could probably read before I could talk. So I was always a very big reader. My parents encouraged me to read, and I think I could read much more than I could say for the longest time, but then it just piles up inside, and maybe at some point it just starts to overflow. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like that. I mean, at some point you feel like you're just, or I can suppose that you feel like you're just swimming in the language, and now you can do whatever you want in it. And which brings me to a question that might irritate the both of you. Okay, תודה אמא. That was my mom telling me to hold the mic closer. I will. So, actually, it was supposed to be the first question. It was the question of plot, because I feel like maybe, not that you do not have plots, you have plots, but when reading you and when reading you, I always feel like maybe that's not the most important thing in your mind. Is it true? You want to start?
Well, I would say that Mislaid is a very plotted book. It's like a Shakespearean comedy, or it's like an operetta. That's how I planned it. But this book, The Wall Creeper, Hakotli, is a book about a personality. It's about a voice. So the events proceed almost like a picaresque. She just stumbles from one situation to the next until on about, not even the last page, but the last half a page, she takes control of her life. So, that's the happy ending, like the little whipped cream on top. But my books vary a lot in that way, and I've been doing on-the-job training as a writer, so that in my most recent book, Nicotine is what it's called, nicotine, like in cigarettes. I feel like I managed to combine the methods I used in both of the earlier novels, planning a plot ahead, and also just having an action that's passed along from scene to scene to scene to scene, so that, which is what makes it hard to put down. I'm not in control of my technique yet entirely as a novelist, but I'm very glad that people are willing to pay me to keep learning.
And yes?
Until my recent book, including, I tried my best to have a plot in every book I write, but lately I can only describe, and the book that I'm writing right now is full of descriptions because I live in such a place for 3 years that you must describe it. It's the middle of Tel Aviv, not nicotine, but methadone. All the junkies of Tel Aviv come every day to this place to get their methadone. And even when you go to the supermarket to buy groceries, you have to look at them and to meet them. And no, they are very transparent for the rest of the people, but I can see them and I can see what is going on with them. And I describe it in my book, how all the coffee houses get rid of them, and how did McDonald's, they tear all the tables and chairs. Instead of telling them to bid it, they tore all the chairs, and now they are in coffees. But they have problems in sitting there because the chairs are very high and their bodies are already tordu.
I have a feeling always when I read your books that that you're I'm obviously reading myself into everything I read, okay? But I always have a feeling that you start with a feeling, and that you don't start necessarily with knowing exactly, your end, okay? Which I think maybe some authors do know exactly where they're going when they sit to write a novel. But I really have a feeling that you start with a strong emotion, and if you write about that, and then the story perhaps builds itself around it. Would you say it's true, or?
I start in the middle. This is what I tell my students in Bezalel. Start in the middle, and then there is a slow disclosure of what is happening. Where are we? And this is suspense. This is tense in the text. This is very good. But now I have this problem of objecting plots. Whenever I write and I feel that a plot is coming, I kill it. And I continue to describe the road, the people, the sound, the color of the service, like police and ambulance. When I sleep, when I am in my room, I can also hear the bottles touching, clinking each other, because the homeless are looking for bottles, and I'm in the middle. And also, I can see blue light all over my bedroom. It's the police. I can identify them by light. The city of Tel Aviv, orange. The police of the city of Tel Aviv, orange and blue. The police, blue. VIP, scars, blue. Ambulance, red. And I also live not far away from the hospital, Ichilov. So imagine yourself the sound, and also it's the eastern entrance of Tel Aviv. Well, I think about 1 million people are crossing my house every morning. 1 million, at least. It's like living in Tokyo, though I was never there.
Getting away from plot, because plot is not considered artistically the highest element in a novel. It's sort of the main component of pulp fiction or of genre fiction. So it might be that you're developing literary ambition. And if you keep at it, you know, in another 10 years, you'll be a lyric poet.
I don't think so. I don't think so. There was a very well-known Israeli film director who lived en face, in front of me. His name was David Perlov, very known, and he didn't make films with plot except one or two, but the main of his oeuvre is diaries, are diaries about what's going on. And now, when I live in the same junction, I understand him. I feel I'm going into a process called Perlovization. I'm losing it. I can describe, I see details, I hear fractions, but where is the plot? So I tend to lean on the personality of the man who writes this description, but I also made him a very fictional, I gave him a very fictional and non-logic origins. So I think I will erase it, like you do.
No, I hope not. But did you ever think about being a poet, or did you ever write poetry?
Well, I went through the same process that Pierre Bourdieu describes in his book, The Rules of Art. I can't pronounce French, but Les Règles de l'Art, something like that. Where he describes these 19th century French writers who all want to be poets, romantic poets when they're young. Some succeed and become the great symbolists. And others gradually move down the ladder. They go from writing lyric poetry to writing prose poetry to writing short stories to writing novels, the novel is a commercial genre. It's a very popular genre. And then right around the time they're 40 and they give up all hope of ever achieving anything as writers, they become journalists. So I had actually gone through that process, but I was rescued, thank God, and restored to the novelist state. But I have written poetry. I won a poetry prize in high school. Yeah. I was 17.
And then you left the vocation because you felt like you've reached your peak.
I started writing arty little prose poems and then began writing short stories, as I said. I moved down. My ambitions progressively became more and more and more modest.
I wanted to ask you, a cut to the second question. It was the question of immigrating, or of living in an environment, in a language that is not your own. And I know that Orly had a brief experience with that, and I think your experience with that is probably 15 years or so. That's what I've read.
It's about 20 years since I lived in the United States.
And you've spent the 20 years mostly in Germany, right?
Mostly Germany, yeah. Here and then Germany.
And could you say how it affected you? I mean, obviously it made you
I'm sure it had many strong effects, probably chiefly on my ego, because, you know, we judge people by how they speak, and especially when you're assessing someone's intelligence, the intelligence of a stranger, you tend to pay attention to their facility with the language. Well, you know, there I was, you know, alone, stranded in Germany, sounding really dumb all the time, speaking a language that I couldn't speak and think in German at the same time. You know, I would tell people, sort of like pleading with them with tears in my eyes, really, if in America I'm considered an intelligent person and also a good writer, I swear. But I was not necessarily believed. So it's been one of the great gratifications. I cannot tell you how happy it has made me to have my work published in Germany and reviewed well, so that all these people who used to, dismiss me or kind of treat me like chewing gum that they found on the sole of their foot, now they're sucking up to me. What's it? מתחנפת? מתחנפים? I love it.
So you would say that, on the other hand, it was probably a liberating experience. I mean, to live where nobody knows you and you can just, or was it a deteriorating
Liberating
experience?
if freedom is floating untethered through the void, then I was very free. And it's true that it may have affected my writing in a very positive way, because I didn't have people socializing me to write in a certain way. The way if you live in Brooklyn and you're a writer, you're surrounded by other writers reading your stuff and reacting to it. I didn't have that problem.
Only when we were speaking before, you told me about, we were talking about the few months, I think, that you've spent in New York, in upstate New York, right?
In Boston.
In Boston, okay. And the one thing that was interesting that I wanted you to talk about here again is the observations you've had about the English language, and mainly about the place of the place. I'll remind you.
Yes, please.
I'm there for you.
I'm there for you. Okay, we were talking about the chapter in Seinfeld, in which Seinfeld and Eileen, what's her? Elaine. They wanted to make a couple separate, so that he will gain her and she will get him. And he's telling her what to do. He's giving her a tip after they separate, and they are ambushing each one, the opposite sex. He tells her, to Eileen, you have to call him and tell him that you are there for him. And this is something that happens also in Hebrew. The question of place, where does it meet you? Do you have it in English?
Where does it meet you?
Where does it meet you? Something happened to
אני לא
you.
במקום הזה. זה תפס אותי במקום
I'm
מאוד,
looking, I'm talking from a place. Are you talking also from a place? In Hebrew we say, I'm talking to you from a place, from a very empathic place. This is very psychological.
I think of that in English as a recent phenomenon.
Yes, please.
So maybe they're picking it up from you guys. There are too many of you in New York. And it's...
No. It was translated into Hebrew from... Although God is a place for us, the other name for God is Amakom.
Yes.
So, in a way, the origins of that thought might be Jewish.
No, it's all Jewish. I didn't know. I'm sorry.
המקום ינחם.
נכון.
למקום יש אמפתיה.
נכון. The origin is from the Bible.
Yes.
I mean, what's going through my head right now is there's a new book that I've already read because I'm a cool glitterati insider by Jonathan Safran Foer called Hineni, like Here I Am. That's the name of his
That's
book.
the name in
And
English,
maybe
Hineni?
it's called Here I Am. And maybe he's making a point.
Yeah, I'm here for you.
I'm
Why
always there
are
for you.
people always there for you?
Since we met on last day before yesterday, we are sending an SMS to each other. I'm telling her, I always be there for you, and she's telling me in Facebook, in the messenger, I will be there for you. There, not here, there.
But if you go there, you'll find me.
Of course, I'm sure. It's something that is, I think it is simplifying the language, and it's not a good thing. Because everybody now, psychologists, mysticans, horoscope, astrologue, everybody is talking from that place. I'm talking to you from a place that, etc., etc., etc. It's an idiom in Hebrew. It's a problem. It's a problem. I wrote about it in 2000 when I first sensed it. People are talking from a place in Israel. I'm sorry.
And it's not here.
It's there.
I wanted to, if we're on the subject of idioms and expressions that maybe separate us from the place we're in, I think, you know, I'm sure in all the conversations in the festival, at some point you have to speak about politics. So this is the midpoint of our conversation. So maybe that's the right place to speak about politics, but just a little bit. And so I want to move from place to a situation, because in Hebrew we don't speak about, or we hardly speak about the details of the political situation. We tend to just term it as the situation, המצב, and then you can put everything in it. Occupation, government, all kinds of politics. And I realized that, at least in the 2 books that I've read of yours, and in most of your books, you are never in the situation. I mean, or hardly referring to a situation or a political situation. Is that true? Or, I mean, I think when we speak about politics, we never tend to think of them as social politics, but mostly as, oh God, how to say that in English? Political politics, right? We have a separation between security matters, and that's politics, and social classes, blacks and whites, and gender, and that's less considered politics in an odd way.
Someday Israel will have a federal system and then issues like that will become matters of national interest. But Israel, if you think of the United States, it's like, how many Israels? Well, you know, you could start with 50. It's a very, very different perspective you have on politics in the US. When you talk about politics, the first thing you have to do is define your terms, and you can do that for the rest of your life and never actually start talking about politics. Whereas here, there's a consensus on what the basic situation is as a rule, because all you have to do to see it is open your eyes.
But then in The Wall Creeper, you snuck in, or actually it didn't really snuck, it's most of the book, right? Is that a political situation? I'm not exactly sure how to call the, it's because I guess in Israel, everything concerning, oh God, איכות הסביבה, environment, is not political at all, or it's not even in the politics, and if it's discussed at all, then it's discussed, not disgust.
I think countries that are superficially similar, you know, just you go to a new country and they have the same doorknobs you're used to, and you think, oh, this place is like home. But the European Union is run in a very strange, undemocratic way. Many things that happen there are not under the control of anyone, politically speaking. There's an enormous bureaucracy. It writes the laws, it drafts the laws, and the parliament can only do one thing, which is rubber stamp it or refuse to rubber stamp it. That's all that happens. It has the same political structure as a small town mayor and his city council of part-timers who meet 2 hours a month. That's how the EU works. So the directives that are written in this bureaucracy will be handed out to the member countries, and they are under, this is unbelievably boring. It's actually a fact that they know from media research that if you mention the European Union on TV, people will change the channel. So don't mention it. But that political reality is something I wanted to talk about very directly in The Wall Creeper, simply because when on a local level, when you're fighting for an environmental cause, the EU is your best friend. Those EU directives, like the Birds Directive, the Water Framework Directive, they're the only weapons you have. You grow to love them.
But then would you say that the book was embraced by activists, and or is it considered an activistic book?
It wasn't written for activists. It was written for people who would like to read the sex diary of a young, beautiful nymphomaniac so that they will be exposed to environmental themes against their will.
Which brings me to the Egyptian novel. It's not about environment, but it is about a social political, yes, it has a social political issue that you're dealing with, and it's like a little bomb inside your book. And I was wondering if those were even responses that you received from audiences who read it, or Ron Kachlili approached you about it?
No.
No?
No.
Surprise? Okay.
I just want to say that because of the situation in Israel, I can observe another situation in the language. This is what I can do. I cannot do anything with this situation. I was 6 years old when the 6 Days War happened. So I live all my life with this question mark, and it was a question in the main exams in Hebrew. Would you give those territories away, or would you keep it?
Really?
Yes.
What's
1978.
Exams? Wow.
So I just want to say that something that I found out, that the more the situation is deteriorating, the more the language invents new superlatives. And it's amazing. I'm exploring it also, not only that junction where I live. All this new superlative, not only madhim, which is madim, uniform, like you don't pronounce the madim, madim, and all sorts of blessing. Once in Hebrew, there were not all those kind of blessing like good morning, have a good day, have a good week, have a good month. I pray for you that the rest of the day will be okay. Something, המשך יום נעים. What the hell is going on here? And I think it began in the Gulf War, and after that it became the norma in the first Intifada. We wish you all a quiet evening. A quiet evening, it is a superlative. There is a all program in a main radio in Israel, Galgalatz. Pleasant weekend. And people tell them each other now.
Calm weekend, maybe. It's called calm weekend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now have a good weekend. Have a nice, have a makasum wind, and all kind of words. And another thing happened during the 80s, and this is not literature. This is anthropologia. The question of the hug. Once we didn't used to hug each other. In the 80s, in the 70s. If you
don't feel bad.
Yeah. Do you
It's okay.
Yeah. Can I hug you? Can I hug you? I need a hug. All those hug things. This is illegal in Israel. What are you doing? Now you see two boys, not homosexual. I'm hugging. It is also a norma between boys.
They might be Pashto.
No, this idiom, בסופו של יום. It's translated from English.
Yes, but we have many like that.
Everybody talks today בסופו של יום ומחוץ לקופסה.
So you understand Hebrew?
מחוץ לקופסה.
So we could have had the entire conversation in Hebrew. Yeah. But I do have to
Gender.
to gender, and I can't not refer to the opening with the anal sex scene, which was I think in the Wall Creeper, which was I don't know, מדהים, קסום, מחוץ לקופסה. And very liberating to read. I mean, I'm sure you're being asked about it constantly. So at first I thought I'm not going to ask about it, and then I said, yeah, but I can't not ask about it. So actually, I'm most curious to know if women approach you and say, I had my husband read this, just so he knows exactly what it feels like.
Every so often, someone will say something very vague like, I really liked that scene. I'm glad you wrote it. But no one goes into detail, which is fine with me. And
okay. I think, okay, I also don't feel now like I want to go into detail. At first I thought I wanted to go into detail. Just, okay, if my mom says that,
I mean,
I will go into
I could go into detail, but it would embarrass even me. So, no, I mean about anal sex as a literary trope. Like, forget the sex, and just think of it, the role that I see it coming to play in many books I open up. It's a step in intimacy. It's like people grow closer, so they have anal sex. Like, what? Okay. Not. So that's what I was reacting against.
I think the most interesting thing in that aspect for me was that your woman was strong inside and so weak outside, I thought, but then also kind of strong outside and so weak inside. So I think she was moving between being zoremet completely, like she flows throughout the book, and just goes with experiences, goes with men.
That's probably an experience most people have had in bed, where things aren't going well. You're having sex. It's terrible. But you want to keep trying, and if you just say, oh, by the way, this is awful, it's going to be over immediately, and then there you'll be. So you keep trying and experimenting and moving around and maybe doing different things, and it's still not working. And then afterwards you think, what did I just do? That was no fun. But the entire time you were simply trying to invoke a good experience that never happened. So it's a strange position to be in, and that it can happen sometimes with the people you're closest to in the world. These kind of contradictory situations are what you need when you're writing fiction to make it interesting. Situations that are open-ended and confusing no matter what you do to them. They just stay that way.
Which brings me to Dolly City again. I have to, because I just recently, 2 or 3 months ago, I read it out loud. No, I read it, but I don't know how to... traumatic experience. I read it as an audiobook, and I was the reader of the audiobook. It's a book from 1992, and I remember reading it as a young girl, as a teenager, and not understanding most of it, and mainly I didn't understand what Dolly City was for the heroin. Heroin for the methadone. And only when I read it out loud and had to be her because it's a גוף ראשון, I understood, perhaps stupidly, it took me so many years, that Dolly City was her insanity. Why did I understand that? Because there's a part where her sister comes in and she tells her sister, what are you doing here? Are you out of your mind? And then I realized that when you're out of your mind, you're in Dolly City.
I think so. I think you're right. Dolly is, as they say in Hebrew, a city and a mother, עיר ואם. עיר ואם בישראל. Dolly City זאת עיר ואם בישראל. Listen, it was not fun writing this book, but when I finished it, after the other one was erased, I left it at home for about 9 months, and there was another war. You know, wars here are like big. Now it's almost every year.
Every 2 years.
2 years, yes. I left it and I wrote immediately a book of recipes. But the recipes were not good recipes for eating. Like filet without any confidence. Unsecure filet. An apple with a craving for heroin. Water. How to make water. Because today, in Israel, like you have all these superiorities, the new superlatives, you have also an inflation in תוכניות בישול, אני לא
cooking
programs on TV.
And they are talking about it like it's God will that we will deal with it. And I wrote a book with short recipes, and now I found it again, and maybe me and a friend of mine will do a program about it. We are working on it.
This sounds very good.
Yeah, water, especially.
Water. You take water from a fontaine, water from here, water from I don't want to say. You mingle with them and you add a little bit of lemon.
And a dash of water.
This is water, yes. You know, they make a scene out of everything today.
Okay, my first question was actually if writing Dolly City was an empowering situation, and if and then now I have the answer, so I think I know. And also, we only have 8 minutes left, and I promised the audience to be able to ask questions, but I do have one last question at least. I mean, I have 4, but I'll just pick one because I really wanted to talk to you. It was Orly's question, actually. She brought it up, and I thought it was a very interesting question about having a role or a position, tafkid, in a person's life, and how you become identified with your position, whether it's your position as an intellectual or your position as an author or your position as a radical, or whatever position it is. I'm less sure about your position.
I kind of have a little anecdote I could tell about that, which was when my first novel came out in New York, the writer Jonathan Franzen helped me launch it. Like, he came along to the bookstore to interview me and say, "Here, look, here's Nell, here's her book." And he's very famous and has seen a lot of writers at the launch of their first book. And so we're riding downtown in a taxi, and he said, "Nell, you seem awfully calm and relaxed for someone who's about to go on stage and do the first reading she's ever done. Why is this?" And I said, "Well, that's not surprising to me because this is actually the first time in my life I've been doing something that where I wasn't completely faking it. I mean, really, like, you know, getting a rave review in the New York Times, it makes sense to me in a way that working as a secretary does not make sense to me at all. So I feel like I have a role for the first time ever, and it's very, very reassuring and comforting. Like right now I'm on stage in front of a bunch of people, but all I have to do is be Nell Zink, the writer. And coincidentally, that's who I am, Nell Zink, the writer. So it's so easy compared to, it's a social situation that's like the easiest thing in the world compared to everything else I've ever had to do.
It took me about 25, 30 years to understand that I'm a writer and to believe it. I always underestimate myself, but I do it for the sake of literature. I want to be an underdog. I want to remain an underdog. Even though I have success, I forget. When I come and to write, I forget about everything. There is only me that exists, and the paper or the computer. I don't think I am somebody, you know. And also, I don't think I'm somebody when I'm zoremet in Tel Aviv streets. Life is hard enough for me, so I will never feel arrogance or arrogant as a writer, and I cannot identify with it 100%. A complex. So I wanted to ask you how it is. Just a second, it's mס הכנסה paper. It's, you know what's mס הכנסה? It's taxes. Taxes. Is the human necessity of having a home, a country, a geographical identity is a burden or an advantage? The fact that you are like a swift, maybe, that you travel all over and you move from a city, you left your own place.
Well, in comparison to us, maybe, because she moved to another place. You know?
Yeah.
I think that's a hard question to answer because, well, partly because it makes me think of a song on exactly this topic that I really like that happens to be in German, so a Schubert lied. But
now you have to sing. Yeah.
It's called Der Wanderer an den Mond. Ich auf der Erde am Himmel, du, wir wandern beide rüstig zu. Ich ernst und trüb, du mild und rein, was mag der Unterschied wohl sein? Ich wandre fremd von Land zu Land, so heimatlos, so unbekannt. Berg auf, Berg ab, Wald ein, Wald aus, doch bin ich nirgends auch zu Haus. No, the best part is this part. Du aber wanderst auf und ab von Ostens wie in Westens Grab. Land einmal. Shit. Haus, bist auf wo du bist zu Haus. Okay, this is the really good line. Der Himmel endlos ausgespannt ist dein geliebtes Heimatland. So the endless sky is your beloved homeland. And the song is called The Hiker Talking to the Moon, saying, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I have to cross borders all the time. They're always stopping me at checkpoints, which were a new thing in Germany in the 1830s, 40s. and you're the moon, you just move, and you have the entire sky, and you're free, and he just envies the moon. And I think it's quite true that a place where you are tolerated, where you're allowed to stay, where they just say to you, oh, like when you're a citizen, or you have a green card or something, they say, oh, by the way, you know, you can stay here until you get it right. You don't have to fulfill conditions to stay in this country. You're okay here. It's an unbelievably good feeling, and it's something, of course, you take for granted when you're a citizen in your home country. And when you happen to be somewhere else and getting these letters like, oh, by the way, you know, your salary is too small, you need to leave, it's terrifying. It's like this existential terror they try to beat you over the head with. And, you know, I'm glad I'm over it. I mean, I'm glad I got a green card in Germany, but it's sorry about the song.
It's beautiful. And you're also a singer. Thank you very much. And thank you all. We have to... but yes, I think we are living in a place of existential terror, so I think that's a good place to stop, right? And I hope it meets you in a good place. And thank you all very much. And have a good המשך יום.